This podcast is supported by MIDI Health. Are you in midlife, feeling dismissed, unheard, or just plain tired of the old healthcare system? You're not alone. In fact, even today, 75% of women seeking care for menopause and perimenopause issues are left entirely untreated. But it's time for a change. It's time for MIDI. MIDI's not just a healthcare provider. It's a women's telehealth clinic founded and supported by world-class leaders in women's health. Their clinicians provide one-on-one, face-to-face consultations where they truly listen to your unique needs. They offer a full range of holistic, data-driven solutions that isn't one-size-fits-all care. This is care uniquely tailored for you. At MIDI, you will find that their mission is clear: to help all women thrive in midlife, giving them access to the healthcare they deserve. Because they believe midlife isn't the middle at all. It is the beginning of your second act. Ready to feel your best and write your second act script? Visit joinmidi.com today to book your personalized, insurance-covered virtual visit. That's joinmidi.com. MIDI, the care women deserve.
Yay Networks.
I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. Y'all, we have an information-packed episode happening for y'all right now, and our topic is the art and science of plant-based sweeteners and gluten-free flours. So for this week's episode, y'all don't have just me. You actually have a whole slew of us. So here in person, I am actually co-hosting with Amy Davis. She is a registered dietitian, a friend of mine, works with Swerve. And it's not just Amy and I, though. We also are going to have three guests, which we'll tell you a little bit more about, but three experts in the field of plant-based sweeteners and gluten-free flours. So Amy, share with our listeners your expertise, your background, kind of like how we came together on this.
All right. So yes, I am a registered dietitian and nutritionist, and I work with the Swerve team on lots of different things, but a lot of it is providing educational information to our consumers and the internal team. So working heavily with the marketing team, also do a lot of amateur baking. So have had a lot of trial and error myself with, these plant-based sweeteners and flours and all of that good stuff. And I've also had the really cool and unique opportunity as a dietitian to work with our new product development team. So having to, play a role in putting out new products that are better for you and that people enjoy, I think that's definitely one of my favorite things to do there. So yeah, really excited to be here.
It's a cool spectrum of everything that you do because, like you said, it's the education to the consumer. You also create and provide a lot of education to registered dietitians.
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
Not just Swerve, but all plant-based sweeteners.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. And I totally blanked on this before, but one of our recent initiatives has been to engage registered dietitians and future dietitians with lots of different virtual events and mailings and samplings and bringing in some experts to provide more education on sweeteners to other dietitians. And so it's been a really fun, I guess you could call it like RD ambassador program, I guess you could call it, just teaching them more about this whole world of better for you sweeteners and ingredients, because there's just so much coming out. It's hard to keep up with. And so we really just want to be a resource to all of our different health professionals out there and, help out in any way that we can to help educate them on other hot topics in the industry.
And you'll have the computer days where you're creating content like that. And then you have your kitchen days where you're
Absolutely.
testing out recipes and, doing educational videos or new product development. So a full spectrum of like really cool stuff that is part of your role as a registered dietitian. I'm excited to have you. So Amy and I are in person here in my house, and we're about to be joined by our three expert bakers and expert instructors who are coming together for a chef innovation workshop that we'll tell y'all about coming up. So wish us luck that Amy and I, we're at least together so that we know, okay, we're not talking over each other. We can see each other. And then we're going to have our 3 instructors by Zoom/phone. So wish us luck on that.
It's never be a party.
Oh my gosh. I've never done, the most I've ever done is 2 guests. So 3 of us total. This is 5 of us total.
Yeah.
We got it.
It's going to be great. I'm super excited about it.
So this workshop that we're doing, it is called The Art and Science of Plant-Based Sweeteners and Gluten-Free Flours. It is an Eat Fit culinary innovation workshop. And y'all have heard me talk about Eat Fit. That is our nonprofit initiative that we do through Ochsner Health here in New Orleans, but it spans the entire state. And so our registered dietitians work with restaurants, also markets, schools, festivals, but largely restaurants. We have about 500 partners around the state. And we're working with these chefs to incorporate nutritious options onto menus. And one of the things that we found is a challenge for them is desserts and sweets, whether it's frozen sweets, baked sweets. Desserts are a challenge. And there's 2 big things in there that are throwing them for a loop. And it is to make it Eat Fit. Okay, well, there's no white flour. And while you could use whole wheat flour, who really wants a whole wheat cookie? And so the flours we typically use that are Eat Fit approved also is almond flour, coconut flour. But because they don't have gluten in them, they don't behave like regular flours do in baking.
Right.
And then sugars. Of course, we don't want sugar for it to be Eat Fit. So then when you look at plant-based sweeteners, there's a variety of them, and we'll talk about them in just a minute. But chefs struggle with this because in culinary school, a lot of chefs are trained in traditional desserts, but there's a big gap in knowledge about this. And Amy, I mean, we've talked about it, like the chefs, there's so much misinformation out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this kind of came up in discussion of, they've got the meals, the entrees, the appetizers, they can handle that and they do amazing things with it. But when it comes to these better for you desserts that don't have a ton of added sugar and that don't have all the white flour, this kind of mystery to classically trained chefs on how to use these alternative ingredients, how to use these alternative flours and sweeteners, and, where can we fill in the gaps with that education?
And they get frustrated. It's a mystery to them and they get frustrated. And then there's so much misinformation out there. So what we found is, I mentioned that we work with all these restaurant partners, these 500 around the state, all these exquisitely trained chefs. And we saw a few things coming out or some conversations with chefs that they would say, yeah, I'm looking to do, cleaner desserts. And we'd be like, okay, good. Well, they were like doing, I'm air quoting cleaner. And we're like, wait a second. No, you've got maple syrup in this. No, you've got coconut sugar. You have tapioca flour. You've got these, still refined added sugars, and you've still got refined processed flours.
Right.
That doesn't, these things are not healthy. However, one chef in particular had been really hit hard with misinformation by someone. And we had to undo a lot of what was told to him. And it was like, we back all of this up.
Right.
Let's remove all of your coconut sugar. Let's remove your maple syrup. Let's get that tapioca flour, tapioca starch out of there because all of that is still white processed. And when I thought, wait a second, this is one of the most, talented, knowledgeable chefs that I know. And if he doesn't know this, and if he is falling prey to someone who is giving out really just, let's just be honest, wrong information, if he's falling prey to this, who else is? And then it was like, well, wait, if he's falling prey to this, where is there a gap that we need to fill? Like there's obviously something that we can step in as knowledgeable professionals who actually do have the correct information. And then how can we step in and say, not just for that chef, but all? So then I reached out to Swerve and I said, okay, here's what I'm seeing happening. And I'm seeing this going on. And what can we do to educate on like some big platform that we can host an event or something? And so then, our CEO at Swerve is like, yes. And how can we go big with this? And so we reached out to Nochi, and Nochi, it's NOCHI. It's the New Orleans Culinary and Hospitality Institute here. And we were like, hey, do you guys want to jump on board with this? And so Leah Saris is the executive director. She's also a brilliant chef, and she's a registered dietitian. So she was all over this. She's like, yes. And so it's been a really fantastic meeting of the minds to have our Eat Fit team, the Swerve team, the Nochi team, and then in typical Swerve fashion, Swerve is not like, oh, it needs to just be about Swerve. It's like we want to educate on all plant-based sweeteners. So what we've done is we've pulled together with Eat Fit, with Swerve, with Nochi, and we're hosting this all-day workshop. And Amy and I have been putting a lot of time into this of working with, we'll tell y'all more about it in a second, but this all-day workshop is free to chefs from around the state to do exactly that, to close that gap in knowledge, to give them the information, to help them not be the next victim for misinformation. And when they're really trying to make these things, they're not frustrated and they're truly nutritious.
Right, exactly. So yeah, we're super excited about this event. We've been working on it for literally months now, and it's really just going to be this all-encompassing, immersive experience of better for you baking and cooking. So just to give you all a taste, so we have some incredible instructors that are going to be leading these classes, starting with Carolyn Ketchum, who is a 6-time cookbook author, but she also wrote a book called The Ultimate Guide to Keto Baking. She's going to be leading up the breads
She's
class.
Brilliant.
She's amazing. I mean, she's been keto baking for over 11 years, I think, at this point. So incredible wealth of knowledge there.
And we should also say she has an amazing website.
Yes. alldayidreamaboutfood.com.
So it's easy to remember. So Carolyn doing the bread baking, which is gluten-free, grain-free, but you wouldn't even know it with her breads.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got that first. And then we also have our desserts class, and that's going to be led by Ben McLaughlin of Swerve. Obviously he's been baking with Swerve for over 60 years now, and he's done a ton of trial and error with cooking. He also grew up cooking kind of more classically, I would say. And so he's just going to walk everybody through all these plant-based sweeteners and how to use them, especially, with all his knowledge of Swerve. And then our final class will be the frozen goods, and that'll be led by Zach, who's an instructor at Nochi. And of course, he started out in the full-on culinary world in more so the meals, and then switched over to pastry. And then, now he's an instructor, and he has an incredible background as well, has cooked all over the country, and, is really a go-to resource for all those classical baking roles.
And both Ben and Carolyn have actually done this podcast before. Mm-hmm. So I'll link to their interviews because they went even deeper in certain other topics in the past podcasts that they did. But to Amy's point, we said, who are the most knowledgeable people we have in these areas? And so Chef Zach for frozen, Ben for the baked sweets, Carolyn for the breads and quick breads, and all of them fit the Eat Fit criteria, the no white carbs, no added sugar, all of these things. But still the quality that these chefs would want to serve in their restaurants. Right. And the sweeteners that we'll be looking at, that you'll be hearing us talk about today, there's Swerve, and Swerve has the granular, confectioners, and brown options, so brown sugar replacer. And then we'll also be educating the chefs on just pure erythritol. So Swerve is a blend of erythritol and then other prebiotics and a couple of other ingredients, but mostly erythritol. But pure erythritol functions a little bit differently because some of those other things is prebiotic fibers that's added to Swerve, helps it brown a little bit better and helps it function more like sugar. But we want the chefs to also experience just pure erythritol in case that's the ingredient they have on hand and they don't have Swerve. We'll be covering one with the chefs, and also y'all will hear us talking about it. It's one called allulose, and I'll spell it. It's ALLULOSE, so that y'all don't hear us talking about it the whole time, and you're like, what are they saying? And allulose, I'll say this, allulose and erythritol, they got the short end of the stick when it came to naming.
Oh, I know. Such weird names.
It scares people.
Odd. Yeah, it's definitely off-putting, especially when you have things like monk fruit that comes from a plant.
It sounds so
And
cute.
same thing with stevia. It comes from the leaf of a stevia plant. So obviously those just right off the bat sound more like friendly and natural, but rest assured, erythritol and allulose are both, great natural sweeteners and also made in nature. So no worries there.
And they all fall under that umbrella of plant-based, natural, and essentially zero-calorie sweeteners. So y'all will hear us talk about the Swerve variety of sweeteners, the erythritol, which is the main component of Swerve, but when it stands alone, it behaves a little bit differently. Allulose, which is a sweetener, similar level of sweetness to something like Swerve, but it behaves totally differently. And you'll hear us talking about how it impacts browning or freezing in completely different ways. And then we won't as much in this podcast, we talk about monk fruit and stevia. And the reasons are those sweeteners, allulose, erythritol, and Swerve, those are more low intensity sweeteners. They have a closer ratio of 1-to-1 with sugar, whereas monk fruit and stevia are 100 to several hundreds times sweeter than sugar, and they don't really work as well in baking.
Exactly. I mean, allulose, erythritol, those are going to be your go-to natural zero-calorie sweeteners for baking and cooking because they just are so much closer to sugar. Whereas these high-intensity monk fruits, the stevias, they're just all over the map in terms of like sweetness and flavor. And, you just can't use them in a baked good because they don't provide that bulk that sugar does.
They're so intensely sweet, you need a dab of it compared to maybe that cup that you would be using of the other sweeteners.
Exactly. So like literally 1/32th of a teaspoon of stevia would be the equivalent of like a cup of sugar. It's wild.
And too much of it gets bitter and you're not going to like it. And it doesn't give the bulk of sugar like these other sweeteners do. So y'all won't hear us talking about monk fruit or stevia so much in this podcast. I have covered those and others. And I'll link to one more that I'm making a note to myself to link to is one that I actually had Daryl Holiday, the food science. Yes.
He's brilliant.
I was just going to say, and he did a podcast with me on all different types of plant-based sweeteners and kind of the rundown from his perspective and almost like functionality of them.
Oh, I have to go back and listen.
So
that's awesome.
He's hilarious. Like he's funny he's not even trying to be.
Yeah. He's kind of dry.
Yeah, he's so dry. Yes. So if you do want to know more about those of monk fruit and stevia, we'll link to that. Let's talk for a minute about Billy, sponsor for this week's podcast and an Allure Best of Beauty winner. Self-care and routine are more important than ever. So whatever you are using to get ready for the day should make you feel amazing. Billy has recreated everyday essentials by delivering premium razors and high-performing body care directly to you. Go to mybilly.com to get their starter kit for just $9. That includes their award-winning razor, 2 refill blades, and a cult favorite magnetic holder. I love Billy's products. You will too. They leave our skin feeling so soft. And to express a little love for our show, go to mybilly.com/fueled. It's a small way that you can support us while also getting the best razor you will ever own. It's just $9 to get your starter kit plus free shipping always. Go to mybilly.com/fueled. That's spelled mybillie.com/fueled. So for this episode, we have these brilliant minds coming together of Carolyn, Ben, and Chef Zach. We'll be talking about the baking breads, baking the sweet treats, and then the frozen desserts, and really just getting their insight and learning.
I'm so excited to learn from them because every time we talk about this stuff, it's something new every time. So I'm really excited for myself, but also for y'all to learn from them too.
And you know what? I think they continue to learn.
Yeah.
Because they're always trying new stuff.
Yeah. And there's always new things coming out. So, I mean, we're all learning here.
So with that, welcome y'all. We did it. This is by far the largest group that we've ever had on this podcast. So we have Amy and I here in person, and then virtually, but by phone, we have Chef Zach, Carolyn, and Ben McLaughlin, who we'll learn a little bit more about. But this is 5 people that we're navigating on a podcast. Now, for our listeners, we've got it set up several different ways. We've got the Zoom happening so we can see everybody's faces and expressions and kind of get the vibes. But for connection purposes, we're just by phone.
Right.
So fingers crossed this works.
Yes. Hopefully y'all can hear us perfectly loud and clear as
So
Molly points to the microphone. Says, talk to the microphone, Amy.
lean up, lean up. All right. So we've got these incredible experts with us, and each of you has such expertise in a variety of areas with baking. But if y'all can kind of each take turns, give an intro of yourself, kind of your background, your expertise, and also like how and why we roped you into this Gnocchi event that we're doing. So who wants to go first?
Who are you pointing to?
Carolyn, come on.
Okay.
Matt, if y'all can see our Zoom screens, Ben just points like down, but we don't know what his screen looks like. So we don't, it's like the Brady Bunch on our screen. We're like, who's he pointing to? But I think he was nominating Carolyn.
Okay, I accept the nomination. I am Carolyn Ketchum. I write a food blog, a keto food blog called All Day I Dream About Food. Started doing this long time, 11 years ago, because I had gestational diabetes with my third child, and when it didn't really resolve after she was born, I started to investigate low sugar recipes, and then I got more into low carb, and then I got more into keto. And so, as somebody who's always loved to bake, I started messing around with things like almond flour and coconut flour. There weren't a lot of sweetener options back then, and then squirt came on the scene. And quickly became my favorite sweetener. I've been doing this longer than most people even knew what keto was. So I have about 11 years of experience baking with sugar alternatives and flour alternatives, and I consider myself something of an expert.
You are absolutely an expert, and we'll talk more. Well, tell us about your book also, because I was going to say we're talking more about your book, but now's the time. Yeah. Books
plural.
I was about to say, yeah.
This is also why I nominated Carolyn. Like she has a cookbook, and I'll think about it, called The Ultimate Guide to Keto Baking, and it is definitely the textbook foundation and baseline for any kind of low carb baking and better for you baking. You definitely need to get it. That is a plug for her. And then I'll let Carolyn speak about just inspiration and all that good stuff. It's a wonderful cookbook.
Yeah, I have 6 cookbooks, but my pride and joy is The Ultimate Guide to Keto Baking, which I wrote to be a guidebook. I wrote it in the style of Cooks Illustrated, where I experimented, forcing myself to do things I didn't normally do, because most people who bake and cook kind of fall into their rut of this is how I do things. So I forced myself to use different flours, different methods, trying out different things like cooking the same batch of brownies with different sweeteners, with different pans, that kind of thing, until I could be able to tell people how to do things right and how to make things turn out. Because as much as I love them to use my recipes, I also want them to be able to create their own, and this was supposed to be a jumping off point. So, and I hate it when people have to waste ingredients, so I tried to anticipate every question I possibly could in the book, and so that people would then know how to do it on their own if they chose to.
So the book is also, if you may love a recipe that's made with almond flour as the base ingredient, for example, but then if someone, for whatever reason, can't use almond flour, maybe they have a sensitivity or whatever, then you can say, okay, well, if you're going to use coconut flour, here's how you need to adjust the liquid ingredients. Here's how you need to adjust the baking time, etc.
Yes, I did some of that. Now, coconut flour and almond flour are so different that I feel strongly there isn't a really good conversion. So I tend to steer people more to using like seed flours, like pumpkin seed or sunflower seed, because they act more like almond flour does.
But really making it a very scientific approach in this book. So as Ben says, this sort of is like the Bible for low carb, gluten-free baking. Yes.
That was my goal.
Yes.
That was certainly my goal.
There's no other resource like this out there for, better for you, gluten-free keto baking. It's just so extensive. And I mean, I personally learned so much about it, or about keto baking whenever I was going through the book. And I've done a lot of trial and error through the years of working at Swerve anyways. So it's an incredible resource for sure.
And it's actually something, the book that we're talking about of Carolyn's, we'll link to it on the podcast notes, but it's also something that we'll be having available as a resource to the chefs who are coming to the Eat Fit Culinary Innovation Workshop. So with that, let's go to Chef Zach and tell us your background, because I have a feeling that just knowing you and what you do with Gnocchi and kind of your approach, I would expect that there's a level of appreciation for that scientific approach that Carolyn takes to baking that I think maybe a lot of bakers don't. But she has this level of precision that I would think that you might also kind of appreciate from your way of thinking too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I think that's a great way of doing things as far as, leaving any mystery to it. Or I think there's a lot of superstition involved in baking, still is, even though we've made a lot of progress over the last 10 years or so with that. Whereas, sometimes, especially with like making a meringue, for example, somebody's like, well, if it's too hot, if you don't have the air conditioner set at this temperature, your meringue's not going to do anything. So, well, there's a lot of superstition involved around that stuff as opposed to actual hard facts and science. So I think that's great, a great approach to it. It's really going to make a lot, especially now, the way what people want to see in cookbooks and the way the much more knowledgeable, consumer base for that. And they want to know why things do what they do, and they want to understand what's going on instead of just, well, I want to blindly follow this thing, and if it works out, it doesn't. If it, they want to understand. And I think that's kind of really where, just even home bakers, not just professionals, are going. Because even professionally, a lot of people are just like, I don't know, it just works. And there was
Or it
no
doesn't,
reason.
and then they get frustrated.
Yeah, and then they get frustrated. There's a lot of frustration for me. That's when I started off in the industry. I started off cooking, and there wasn't really any rhyme or reason. Just, hey, just go ahead and do this, make it taste good. And then there's, well, why does this happen? Why does this happen? At that point, not to age myself too far, but there wasn't anything really like that around. This was before the molecular gastronomy craze had kind of hit, before like the El Bulli kind of really became internationally known. And, before the age of the internet and things like that, we're just like, well, just do it this way. And that's just the traditional way it works. And then when I switched over to baking, the pastry chef I work for, what really drew me to it is that, it's like, well, why did this not work out? It's, oh, it didn't work out because this. There's a reason behind it. And that's partially what really drew me to baking. It's like, okay, there's a science behind it. There's a reason why things do what they do or don't do what they do. And that was that was a lot of fun for me to kind of understanding the rules, it's whereas before there just didn't seem like there were any rules, and some things worked and some things didn't. And that's what I tell my students is right now, my students, your job is to learn the rules. Once you understand the rules, you can learn, I can bend these rules and then I can break these rules completely. But there's other rules that are just going to be hard and fast. So I think that's a great approach to things with that. But
Chef Zach, are you a type A personality that you like this kind of structure? Does this say anything about you as a person?
I think in the kitchen I'm different than I am at home, I guess. So I'm very much a type. I kind of have to be in charge of my environment when I'm in the kitchen. At home, not as much, but.
I love that. Okay, so Zach, tell us about your role at Gnocchi. I think this is fascinating, and it seems like every day, not only are you able to share your knowledge, but you're probably learning every day.
I am the baking and pastry instructor at Gnocchi and the New Orleans Culinary and Hospitality Institute. It's what it's short for. Not the pasta, not the dumpling, but NOCHI, and pronounced differently. Although some people still make a mistake, but that's okay. We can learn to live with that. I'm the baking pastry instructor here. I'm also the faculty chair, so I'm basically kind of the point person for myself and the one other instructor that we have currently as we're growing our little school here. But I've been here since day one. I was fortunate enough to work with the Culinary Institute of America when I was there before I started here. They consulted and helped design the curriculum for Gnocchi. When I was working there, I actually got to work with the consulting department to help design the curriculum for this program. So when I was hired and came on board, it was pretty familiar stuff to me, so I came on for that. I've been teaching professionally full-time for 5.5 years. Before that, I was in the industry for over 20 years. about 7 years in culinary before I switched to baking and pastry. I worked in New York, in DC, in Detroit, and in New Orleans, obviously, and then back and forth between all those places. Worked in Michelin star restaurants, worked in luxury hotels, things like that. And now I'm in education, and I really enjoy it. I don't want to go back. I think I really enjoy what I do. I've gathered all this knowledge. Now it's time for me to put that back out into the world. Let look at it.
And with the baking and pastry curriculum, most of it is traditional baking and pastry, but then you also do cover the gluten-free, grain-free flours or plant-based sweeteners with your students.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a class dedicated to, we call it Modern Approaches to Baking. And that kind of is all encompassing. We talk about gluten-free. We talk about nutritional baking. We talk about sugar-free, dairy-free. We also introduced what's known as like the molecular gastronomy. So we talk about these different ingredients that are used in a lot of these other things. We talk about what xanthan gum is and where it comes from, and guar gum, and what are the uses, because they have a lot of use. It kind of crosses over a lot of times with, especially with gluten-free baking, using these different stabilizers to achieve different things and developing products like that. So it's a huge part of the program. It's honestly, it's a big selling point. When I tell prospective students that are on tours about that class, their eyebrows kind of raise a little bit, like, oh, that's really interesting. The parents' eyebrows raise a little bit. This happened today, where they were, it's like, oh, that's really interesting that you guys cover that, and we do that. It's a huge part of the industry that not everybody necessarily thinks about sometimes. But there's a huge demand for it, and there's a lot of people who want to do really great things with it. And I think the days of going into a restaurant and getting a fruit plate or just a bunch of sides as your entree if you want to eat healthy, or you have a restrictive diet for health reasons or for allergy reasons, those days are numbered, if not already over. And I think a lot of chefs are intentionally developing plant forward and doing things like with Eat Fit and partnering with you guys. So you see those on the menus all the time now. And they're intentionally doing this. One, it's demand, and it's about how people want to eat now, not just necessarily to have a restriction, but I think it's really how people want to eat. And it's my probably getting older, it's how I want to eat now. So
yeah. It's also exactly why we decided to host this workshop for the chefs, because what you just said is what the consumer wants. But unfortunately, a lot of the chefs, even the most exquisitely trained chefs, just don't know what to do with these ingredients. And so they've got it covered in all other areas, from the cocktail through everything else of drink menu, food menu. But like when it comes to desserts, they're stumped, and they have tried some of these things. They get frustrated. And so it was exactly this kind of shift in the culture. And then also seeing that knowledge gap with even our most talented chefs, that we said, wow, we've got to hop in and do something.
Yeah, it's not easy to do if you're a traditionalist. If you kind of came up in that, all of a sudden it's a very different thing to do. It's more challenging because you're taking away a lot of things that sugar not only, it doesn't just make something sweet, it does something else to the recipe. The flour, wheat flour, the gluten isn't just because it's there for flavor. There's a lot of structure that's involved with it. But how do you get around those things? Because in pastry, it's not just about what it tastes like. It does something else. It brings structure, or it does certain things to it. So when you're starting to play around with it, there's a lot of different things that you have to take into account that it changes drastically when you're doing things like that. So I think there's some resistance from that, because you're getting them out of your comfort zone, but there's also a lot of challenges with it as well.
I think one of the big mistakes that a lot of people make is sugar substitute. Well, then I can just, cup for cup. Oh, it's cup for cup for sugar. Oh, it'll work the same way. And then they're floored to discover that cookies don't spread, or ice cream hardens, or, and it's just, if you don't understand the properties that these things have, and I think, professionally trained chefs might do exactly the same thing, because you're not taught how gluten works or how sugar works, and it works the way it does. It's magic, So
Agreed. And exactly those frustrations that chefs have, and what Carolyn just said, what Chef Zach just said, is why we're hosting this decided to host this workshop. And then it's also the things that we'll be talking about with y'all today of what are some of these things that for the home baker to keep in mind and the home sweet person. So Ben, let's hear about you, and then we'll go through the different courses that y'all are teaching and kind of the nuts and bolts of it. So, but first I want to learn about Ben.
No, thank you, Molly. I appreciate it. Chef Zach, I have another question for you, though. I'm kind of excited about this. So when you say bring up the xanthan gum with some of your peers, or even with your students, is that a new ingredient that they've heard of or used, or do you feel like it's kind of the unknown and they're kind of novices in that space?
The students, for the most part, are pretty novice about it. With my peers, it's kind of hit or miss. It depends if they kind of have. I guess it was probably about 8 to 10 years ago when the molecular gastronomy craze kind of hit in the mid of the last decade. So from 2000 to 2005, when everybody was trying to make foams out of stuff and do all these crazy things, that was the trend in fine dining. They learned about this stuff and they studied this kind of stuff and tried to figure out what it was. If they didn't really kind of fall into that craze or not the craze, but trend really, or didn't really explore that when that came about at that time, most of them don't really know what it is. Oh, it's a thing that thickens stuff, right? So they didn't really explore kind of and really look into in depth to kind of what it really can do. So.
Okay, thank you. So Molly, I hope that's okay. I'm just curious because part of my background is I truly am a country cook. Like I learned from my mom, I learned from my grandmother. I know I've said this before on your podcast, Molly. They taught me everything I know, and then basically it's just been trial and error. Now I make tons of desserts with the sugars and the flours. So yeah, I started with Swerve about 6 years ago, and it was a sugar replacement company. And before I used all the flours and the sugars, and used all my grandmother's and my mother's recipes, and even some of my own. But the reality was, if I was going to sell a sugar replacement, I needed to figure out, does it really do what I'm told it will do? So I took all of my favorite recipes. Some of these we'll speak about on this podcast, like my chocolate tarts that I used to serve at dinner parties. It was a hit. So I had to figure out how do you make that better for you. So that's been my process over the last 6 years, really, is just making better for you treats. Molly had me start actually with the sugar replacement because I need to learn it. And then I started kind of moving towards the coconut oil in place of butter. And then she would try to get me to do some whole wheat flour. So I did that instead of all-purpose cake flour. And now I've completely shifted into your almond flour, your coconut flours, and your whey protein, all that good stuff. So that is my background. That's why I wanted the two of y'all go first, because y'all actually have lots and lots of experience. Carolyn is basically a mentor, in my opinion, to me. Chef Zach, I would sit at your feet for as long as you would let me. So I look forward to meeting you in person. But that's why I wanted them to go first. I am country, which I know a lot of y'all are like me, but just know it's possible even for you to do some of these things.
And Ben, while Chef Zach may be the professor in this, Carolyn's got the multiple books on this topic. You have years and years of experience, and then also the patience to test and retest and perfect and style it and make these dishes look like what people want them to look like, what resonates with people. For those of y'all listening, at Ben's wedding, he had a gluten-free, grain-free Swerve wedding cake that was absolutely beautiful. Mm-hmm. But, and also on that note, had everything like little name cards that had any allergens, if anything contained anything in everything and all the food. It was a very thoughtful approach to it. And, so it's something that Ben started with this journey because of what his career path was, but then it became part of your lifestyle, which is really great. And Ben, one of the first recipes that you made over was some blueberry cheesecake bars that were your mom's favorite, your grandma's recipe or your mom's? No,
well, they
Paula
came
Deen?
from, what is that? What? No, it could have been Paula Deen. Because all that butter. It wasn't Sandra Lee. It was, what is it? Stonewall blueberry jam jelly. I think it's on their recipe to make those blueberry bars.
It was like on the jar or something, right? Or something like that.
Those blueberry
and I was like, how do I make this better for you? Which, fortunately, I've been able to. But that's, again, one of those recipes I used to make. Used to be a pleaser and an ooh and ah. But then how do I just make it a little better for you?
So,
That's
Amy,
a great example.
Ben's blueberry cheesecake bars, which are zero added sugar, they're gluten-free, grain-free, low carb. I mean, they're everything that you would want it to be nutritionally, but you know how delicious they are. Our Fuel Cafe at Oshner Fitness Center is now selling them.
Oh my gosh.
They're making
That's
them.
so cool.
They are selling them, and y'all, they can't keep them in. Like and so I was
It's a
like,
great
okay,
recipe, for real.
make a quadruple batch and
Yeah.
freeze it, but like our social media person for the fitness center, who usually maybe the cafe is not front on her radar, those blueberry cheesecake bars, she did a profile on our cafe supervisor because like the blueberry cheesecake bars led her down that path.
Right.
And that's something that Ben made. It was something that he had that was a favorite recipe, and it was one of his first that he experimented with. So all of this that y'all are hearing is why these three people are pulled together to be these experts in helping to further the education of our chefs from around the state who are really hungry for more information on gluten-free, grain-free cooking, how to use these sweeteners and all of this. So I guess let's go in the same order that we did of talking through the course that you're teaching, because all of y'all are expert in so many areas of um, gluten-free, grain-free baking and the plant-based sweeteners, but each of you kind of have your specialty area that you're teaching this course. So just starting with Carolyn, let's go through what the specific topic is that you're covering with Gnocchi. Or actually, as this is airing, it will have already happened. So we could say that you covered, but the specific topic that you're covering and why the main concepts that you're covering in this that people just don't know or they get confused about.
Okay, well, I am covering grain-free bread. There's a lot of caveats to that because if you follow paleo bloggers or follow paleo diet, grain-free bread can mean a lot of different things. They can use, in paleo, if you're not trying to be low carb, it can be tapioca flour and like very starchy stuff. So I'd almost add to this that it's like low starch bread.
Great point.
In this case. Because I can't use any of those things for myself. So, and my readers and followers don't either. So yeah, grain-free, low-starch breads, let's call them. And I will be mostly touching on almond flour and coconut flour with a few little bits on maybe some other flours like oat fiber or lupin flour, which I don't use. Readers have started to express an interest in. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to show them a couple of recipes, and one of them is extremely popular. It's keto focaccia, and it looks a lot like the real thing, and I personally believe it tastes like the real thing and has the texture of the real thing, but it isn't using any wheat flour. It's just it's a combination of almond flour and coconut flour. And one of the things I'm going to do for my class is, I guess I'm teaching this 3 times over in one day, is I feel like, well, as I said earlier, leaving behind or sort of understanding the role of gluten is super important, because until you understand what it does, you can't understand how to compensate for it. So gluten, as Chef Back said, is more than just flavor. It is, I've seen it described, and I love this one, as like a magic elastic band, because it expands, but it creates these protein bonds that allow bread to rise and catch all the gases from yeast, or if you're using baking powder or baking soda, it catches the gases so that's what makes your bread rise in the oven, but then it also hardens into place so it doesn't sink again. And without understanding that, you can't have any clue how to compensate for it. So we'll discuss that briefly, because that's a big topic. And basically we'll talk about how almond flour and coconut flour completely differ from gluten-based flours. Almond flour is higher in fat. It's definitely not as finely ground as wheat flour would be. It has more protein, but it's not the same kind of protein as gluten, so it can't form those bonds. Gluten is a protein, for listeners who don't know that, or it's a set of proteins, actually. And so almond flour can't do the same things as gluten flours, wheat flours. And then I'm going to talk about coconut flour as well, which is a really strange beast if you've never used it. The first time you use it, you try to make something, you stuff it into, I don't know, a pan of brownies or something, and they come out like hockey pucks because it is the best way I just can describe coconut flour is it's incredibly thirsty. You need to add, to get it to do anything you want it to do, you must add a significant amount of eggs or at least egg white. And it also soaks up a lot of oil, it soaks up a lot of liquid. And so you use it in a lot less quantity as well. So it's, for a pan of brownies, you might use half a cup of coconut flour where you'd normally use, 2 cups of coconut flour, 2 cups of regular flour, that kind of thing. So it's very, very different as well. And then one of the areas that I want to talk about, which is I really sort of, it's a trick I learned early on and I just have never stopped using it, which is using protein powder can help make up for the lack of gluten by helping things rise more. It doesn't necessarily bake into place the same way, but it will keep things from falling, and it actually keeps things more cohesive as well. So I use whey protein a lot, but a lot of people, if they have a dairy allergy, don't want to use whey, so you can easily use egg white protein. It works just as well in most situations. People often ask me these days, because collagen is such a hot ticket health item, can they use collagen powder? And no, it doesn't work the same. It tends to be very gummy, so which makes sense if you know what collagen is. So it tends to be not as a great replacement. But I've seen people, like I've had readers say, "Oh, I've used pea protein in place of the whey protein. It worked just fine." So a lot of plant-based proteins can work just as well there. And we'll talk about a little about the other flours, and then we're going to make the focaccia, hopefully all together. And that one rises really nicely, and it looks like the real thing. And it's, for me, as somebody who always loves dipping a piece of focaccia into olive oil before dinner, yes, it's perfect. And it really fills that craving, I guess. And then we're going to do we're going to have an option for not sweet so much as we're going to do cream scones, which may not be bread in the way that people think, but then you can turn that into strawberry shortcake, or you can make them savory scones, or you can make them biscuits. So that's what we're going to go through on the day.
So for our listeners, if you're in this bread baking class, we're looking at gluten-free, grain-free bread. But as Carolyn said, what she's looking for personally and what she needs is low carb. And I think a big thing to just keep in mind is when you're looking, say in the grocery store or at recipes online for even a gluten-free or grain-free bread, a lot of them are horrific nutritionally. Tapioca flours, potato starches, rice starch, they're just all this starchy flours that may be gluten-free or grain-free, but they're certainly not nutritious. And so what Carolyn is saying is, okay, we don't want those. We want the low starch breads. And when we look at our Eat Fit criteria, those things don't fit into the Eat Fit criteria. So when we're looking at how do we make this Eat Fit bread that hopefully these chefs and bakers could then say, okay, let me take this olive oil rosemary focaccia. Who doesn't want this? And then, we can serve that in our cafe and our coffee shop at our restaurant, put a few squares on a plate going out to a table. Like that's an amazing, approach. So those are kind of why Carolyn is doing these, because there's things that can resonate with restaurants, but they're also real learning tools for us at home. So when we're talking about gluten and the kind of the functionalities of gluten, is the structure, it makes it not a product not crumble. Like it sounds like you're kind of saying we need to have this really healthy respect for gluten and like what are we doing to replace it?
Absolutely. Gluten it's kind of magical what it does in baking. It keeps things from drying out. So that's why so many of those gluten-free breads on the market, you get one piece, you open the bag, and then the next day it's really, really dry because rice flour and those things all are very dry. And they have a tendency to dry out. Gluten adds so much to baking. And when people don't understand that, then like Zach said, they think it's just about flavor or getting it to rise, that one thing, but it's so many things. And when you're gluten-free baking, I feel like one of the most important things is you have to set your expectations at the door. The results won't be exactly the same. That's not to say they're not good. I think we're brought up to think, well, this is the gold standard, but is it really? I mean, is it really the gold standard if it's not healthy, for one thing? And if you just adjust, I've gotten to the point in my life where my taste buds don't like gluten-based things anymore. They just don't taste good to me. They taste floury, which sounds like could be good, but no, it doesn't taste good to me anymore. So setting your expectations at the door and understanding how, again, like you said, a healthy respect for gluten and what it does can help you create things that mimic it more.
Which is where the things like the protein powders come in and mimicking that.
Right.
And like you said,
gluten is a protein. Yep, gluten's a protein, and adding protein powder to cakes and muffins and breads really will help it rise a lot better. And I've started to add a little bit more and a little bit more. And when I played around with it enough that I've even gotten keto angel food cake, and it takes a significant amount of protein powder, which is nice and low carb, but gives it the fluffiness that you want in angel food cake.
And that would be like an unflavored protein powder, right? With no sweetener, nothing like that.
Right. I always choose grass-fed whey protein or basically egg white protein. A lot of people will say, well, why can't I just use more egg whites? But then you're messing up the ratios of wet to dry. So it's really important to use a dry gluten, when you think about it in flour, is a dry protein. It's a powdery substance. So it's not until you start adding the liquids that it starts creating the bonds. So you need to mimic that. And so I usually use unflavored whey protein or unflavored egg white protein. If you happen to be making a sweet dish and it's chocolate, then chocolate protein powder works fine. But I try to just use the unflavored one.
and no matter the brand, a lot of times the chocolate protein powders, they don't really taste like chocolate.
Yeah, you can always add your
True.
own cocoa,
Right.
which is
Right,
a
right.
staple, cooking ingredient in home.
It allows you to the sweetness too. Like sometimes when I've had flavored proteins, they're so overly sweet. That little bit is almost painful to my palate. This way, if you go unflavored, then you adjust the sweetener to your own taste.
No, it makes sense. Totally.
Okay, Carolyn. So, are there any other ingredients that people could use to replace gluten? Like, I know that collagen peptides are popular these days. Are there any other recommendations that you use for gluten replacers?
I do use some xanthan gum in certain things that are more likely to crumble because it can create the bonds. It doesn't help things rise as much the way a protein powder does, but it helps create the bonds and give it a little more structure so that when you take it out of the cake pan or bread pan or what have you, it doesn't fall apart. There's a couple of things you can do there. There's psyllium powder. It's a strange beef too, though, so it can end up sort of gummy in things, so you need to be careful there. And one thing for thickeners that I started to use, I use it mostly for thickening, but I haven't played with it as much in baking, but is glucomannan, which is
It's soluble
a powder.
fiber.
Yes, it's a soluble fiber, and it's in like Metamucil and things like
Yes,
that.
that's
But
glucomannan. I look at like, oh, lower your cholesterol with glucomannan.
sure. But adding, a quarter teaspoon or a half a teaspoon to a sauce can help it thicken. So I started to try to bake with it where I would have normally put xanthan gum.
It sounds like, and I don't think I really made this distinction before. So you're saying like xanthan gum helps to give kind of that structure and the texture. And
Yeah.
protein powder also does, but in addition to that, protein powder helps to leaven or give it that fluffiness.
Rise.
Yes, it does. But you wouldn't necessarily want that for certain
Right.
textures, right? So you might go, if you want a more dense thing, but that
Yeah.
is actually going to hold together, like say a torte.
Yes.
You don't want it to rise too much. It's supposed to be dense and chocolatey.
But your focaccia, the protein powder makes sense.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
And the same with my wedding cake, Molly, that you mentioned. Like,
Yes.
there's protein powder in that gave it the cake-like texture,
Yes.
Oh,
in my
Yes.
opinion. Anyway.
yeah.
Nice. So fascinating differences and all these nuances when you think about baking breads with these gluten-free, grain-free flours. I'm also making notes as Carolyn's talking that I want to link to um, the book, Carolyn's book that we talked about, that is essentially like the gluten-free baking Bible. But we'll link to that, but also your website that has how Ben's holding it up. So it's the ultimate guide to keto baking. And Also, Carolyn's website has some really good resources on the differences between almond and coconut flour and how to work with them. So when she's saying, okay, almond flour has more fat, it's got a higher moisture content. Coconut flour, you use far less and it's so dry, it soaks up all these liquids. You don't have to
Right.
memorize all that stuff. Carolyn's got all this in very concise references that like truly I would bookmark them.
Honestly,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so true. And I'm even thinking back, Zach, what you were saying is like when people go through culinary school, they learn all these different rules of baking and how different ingredients function and act whenever you're baking and cooking. But nobody's ever taught these things about these almond flours and coconut flours and xanthan gums and so on and so forth. But Carolyn's resources, her books, her website, it really does kind of walk you through all that stuff. So it's like you can look at all of this wonderful, all of these wonderful resources that she's put out and kind of turn to those as your rules and kind of learn from that. So then you can go and apply these whenever you're trying to do your own gluten and grain-free baking at home. So, yeah.
And I would say, it's so good when you try it out for yourself. So you can read it and you can take it in here into your brain, and it doesn't really compute until you actually try it. But don't go for the angel food cake yet. Try muffins. Try something that's relatively straightforward and less difficult, so that you can see what happens. And then do some almond flour muffins versus coconut flour muffins, because you'll be astonished at A, what you have to use differently, and B, how different the two flours behave.
Agreed.
No, just talking about the rules. I mean, you have the rules for your traditional ingredients, but now you're using different ingredients. You need to understand the new rules with those. So, and I think that's a great resource for learning the new rules. And when you learn and understand the new rules, like, okay, now I can apply these to traditionally what I've been doing as a professional in the hospitality or just a home bakery too.
And you almost need to forget all the rules you knew before, because they're not going to help you. I have so many readers who say, I was a really good baker and then I tried to do this and I didn't know how. And I was like, that's where you went wrong. Like, don't think that things are going to work the same, because they're not.
Yeah, they just don't.
Completely different conversations. And then Ben, shifting still in the baking conversation. So Ben's course, so while Carolyn is leading the course on all things bread baking, Ben is leading the course on baked sweets.
Yeah.
And so tell us some of the main things you'll be covering. And I think it's a good thing. Like, you're reiterating the same concepts of flours that Carolyn's talking about. But then in addition to the flours, it's also the sweeteners and how those interact with baking, and share with us some of that.
That's right. And I predominantly use swerve just because of my background, but I am starting to dabble more in allulose, so we'll be using some of that. Amy, I feel like you should speak more to allulose for me, because you're probably more familiar to it. If you want to share a little bit on what allulose is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really nice reiteration of, like, Carolyn will cover the basics of all the breads and stuff, and you will talk about those ingredients as well, but then more so focus on the sweeteners. And I think we're in a really cool place in, like, the food industry, and people taking such of an interest in their health that we have all these really cool alternatives available now, especially when it comes to sugar alternatives, because we know that time and time again, every single research study you look at, everything says we need to do our best to limit sugar intake. And so we do have a lot of really nice alternatives.
Molly, you want to pause it? We lost Amy.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me?
Amy, talk for us. Yeah, you're gone.
Can you hear me? Testing 1, 2.
Can you guys hear me? Are y'all hearing me?
We lost both of you.
Molly either.
Oh, because I muted my phone. No, but Amy I heard you were loud and clear on what was recording the whole time.
Oh, so it was recording. Okay. Well, I'll just back up a second.
Oh, I was writing some notes here and I think I hit my phone. I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
You can just back up to your last thought because everything was still being recorded.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I think we're in this really interesting place in the food industry where we now have all these amazing sugar alternatives available.
All right, y'all. So we have already heard a lot. We have learned a lot, and this is only the half of it. So next week, we are going to hear from Ben and the expertise that he has that he'll be sharing with us, and the pro tips that we'll be learning from Ben, and then also Chef Zach and what Zach is teaching at Noki, what he's teaching in this particular class, and how we can learn from it. And what's really cool, we have the in real time happening here on the podcast next week. Chef Zach actually, as we say, we're all continually learning, because a lot of these products are, while they're natural, they're plant-based, they're really new on the market and they're new to us. And so we're constantly learning about them ourselves. We're constantly learning how they behave, how they perform. And so you'll hear Chef Zach in mid-experiment. So as he's talking with us in real time on the podcast, he actually had some experiments going. And so, the podcast that we were recording was done a few days in advance of the Noki Eat Fit culinary innovation event. The podcast, as we're recording it, of course, is a couple of days in advance of the big Eat Fit Chef Innovation Workshop at Noki. So I chatted with Chef Zach at the Eat Fit Chef Innovation Workshop about a whole bunch of things where it was fascinating to learn from him throughout the entire workshop, and all of our instructors, all three of our instructors of the day. And actually we had a fourth, we had Cole Newton, who did cocktails. But anyway, I brought the handheld recorder. So y'all will hear him talking through his experiment in real time, as he doesn't know what the answer is. And then you'll be able to hear a few days later what the results were. And really, I won't even spoil it by saying what he was testing, but it was really, really cool. Basically, how sweeteners are affecting freezing points when we're trying to do these frozen desserts. But I'll leave it at that. So anyway, I've already learned a lot. I know Amy has too. We've got more in store for you next week. So tune in. And of course, as always, we'll include the links that our experts mentioned in the show notes of this episode, including the link to Carolyn's book. And let us know what you think as you are experimenting with these plant-based sweeteners, with these gluten-free, grain-free flours. Let us know your experience, what you've loved, maybe recipes you've experimented with that have turned out incredibly. If there's certain things that you've done that haven't turned out so well and you wonder why, our team of experts is also incredibly generous with their time. And they've offered, hey, Molly, if you get a question from a listener and you're not sure how to help them solve it, reach out to us. So we've got them as a resource. I have them as a resource, and that means y'all have them as a resource. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. And if you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.